The Sahel region, I've had reason to describe the conditions in that region as the perfect storm. Everything that could be wrong, unfortunately, is wrong in the region. Dire socio-economic circumstances, a youth bulge that are out of job, governance that is not serving the needs of the people, the unfortunate legacy that the French post-colonial administration has left in those countries, and then, of course, the activities of non-state armed groups. In some of these countries, the non-state armed groups are so multifaceted. You've got the ideological ones that are affiliated with either Al-Qaeda or with the Islamic State, and then you have other movements like the Fulani and the Tuaregs that somehow have found ways to operate together. And then add all of that, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. So that, in a nutshell, is the perfect storm that has created the conditions that unfortunately has made the Sahel the hotspot for both extremism and other forms of organized crime in the world at the moment. And it is in that circumstances that these three countries have found themselves, where there has, in the case of Mali, there have been one coup after another. And then, interestingly and quite worrisome, is the fact that they've rejected more or less all the multilateral bodies. In the case of Mali, it's rejected the UN mission that has been there for more than a decade. It's also recently rejected the peace accord that it had with the Tuaregs. So all of these circumstances are making the region even more combustible, as it were. It's just like that condition that has reached a boiling point and is just waiting for one little trigger to me, and that's, I think, is the worrisome nature of that region. And of course, it's impacting West Africa. If we go back to what happened in Libya after the death of Gaddafi, we saw how weapons trickled into West Africa, including Nigeria, and how since then we've not recovered as a country as a result of this inflow of weaponry. Of course, the non-state armed groups, whether ideological or the organized crime,
or just mercenaries,
as they were, they find their way into most countries within West Africa.
I want to get to that in a bit, because people don't really understand how bad it is around the region. If you travel around West Africa, you get the sense that there is trouble afoot. There's a lot of things brewing. But there's something you mentioned about the unfortunate legacy left by the French colonialists. What did you mean by that? So
there has been a resentment, growing resentment towards the French in the West African sub-region. Most of the countries where the French colonized, and of course post the colonial era, they've maintained both political, economic, and cultural ties, very strong ties, to the extent that for most of these countries, their economies are tied to the French economy. Even the currency they use is dominated sometimes in the France.
Are these former colonies still paying tribute?
To an extent, yes. If for instance,
that would explain
in the case of
a lot of the resentment.
Niger, I don't know how true it is, but recently we've come to the realization that even the mining agreements for the uranium that Niger had, the percentage that comes to Niger, it's ridiculous. So nobody has come out to either dispel that allegation or to clarify, to say this is the agreement that was in place. But the reality is that the socio-economic conditions in those countries were not in any way reflective of the resources that abound in those countries. And that's
just so you can educate people like me. I grew up in the north, so I grew up hearing how former French colonies paid tribute, and the explanation we were given as kids is, they pay for the development in the country. Are we wrong?
Well,
so if they built good roads, if the colonialists built a good road, I remember being in Benin and thinking one of the roads looked very similar to a particular road in France. And in my mind, I was like, okay, so are these the roads? Is it that the government is paying for the amount that was used to build the road? Are we correct in thinking this?
Now it's possible that there were agreements for maybe through loans or other agreements, but let's even go beyond that. The living conditions of people in those countries is so horrible. I talked about the youth bulge, the number of youths that were out of job. So that drove the resentment. And then add that to the security circumstance in those countries. France has maintained the military operation in the region. It started with Operation Savar, and then from Operation Savar to Operation Barkhane. More than 10 years, each of these operations. And in spite of that presence, the citizens of those countries were being killed by these non-state armed groups. So, of course, the natural question is, why are we having you in our country when you cannot protect us? And you've not allowed us to develop our local capacity or even to seek other partnerships that would allow us to protect ourselves.
So in your view, are there political motivations behind the insecurity that we're seeing in West Africa?
No, definitely. Every time there is a security issue, the likelihood that there is a political reason behind that security development is extremely high.
In Nigeria,
yeah.
In Nigeria, Boko Haram, banditry, the secessionist movements. Are you saying that there are political motivations behind them?
No, it's unfortunate that, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, violence has been weaponized in Nigeria. Violence has become an element to determine political outcomes.
How does this, what's the thinking here? How does that work? Because we hear this quite a bit, but the work, how does the workability of it, what does that mean? How is it being used?
It's simple. So as an example, anywhere there is a political movement, development, you see the presence of non-state armed groups, armed usually by political interest, sometimes to protect or to support the security ring around that political interest. And in other instances, they are armed to target an opposition political interest. So either to sway that opposition political interest to move in a particular direction, or, and that's the most dangerous one, to sway public opinion towards a particular political interest.
In the North Central, what's going on here?
Ethnic militias that are being armed, sometimes to achieve a political interest, or sometimes as it were.
Like what? What interest? What is happening here?
It could be, for instance, the outcome of an election. It could be, for instance, ownership of certain resources. So one of the theories that is pervasive out there, that, and I hope it's going to be unraveled very soon, is this allegation, this theory that there are minerals in certain locations.
Yeah, we have heard the Minister of solid minerals actually say this.
Exactly. So those are the kind of, influencing of political decisions.
So mining rights, resources in areas.
Exactly. Where violence is now used to achieve an objective. The worrisome element is that the national security architecture that we have should be able to determine this and then, of course, prevent it.
So in a place like Kaduna, okay, let's use Jos since Plateau State is in the news. Mm-hmm. Even though the police paraded a lot of suspects recently, and they said these are the people that were involved in attacks in Boko. So we'll get to that in a bit, because I know you have your views on parading of suspects and special intervention squads. But so let's say a place like Plateau, what kind of political interest would go into wanting to own the resources in Plateau State?
So one thing that I wouldn't want us to do is to simplify the dynamics. This is just one aspect of the conflict. This issue regarding resources and the competition for resources. But there are also several other issues. So one thing that would really help is to disaggregate the issues. Okay. Now, it would be unfair and professionally wrong to use one clean sweep of the brush in Plateau State to say all the conflicts in Plateau State are resource-based. No. As an example, the most recent one in Mangu clearly is an inter-community violence driven by hatred, ethnic, religious hatred, clearly. And perhaps somewhere deep down there may be a resource-driven motive behind it. Because
really, I don't like you. That's it.
Well,
am I using my simple mind to explain that? Yes. I don't like you, so I'm going to kill.
Well, it's not so much as I don't like you. It's the fact that perhaps your presence is limiting the ability to determine a political outcome. As an example.
That makes sense.
So if your presence is either reduced or to an extent you are encapsulated and prevented from exercising your suffrage, as it were, then that political outcome would be achieved. That's an example. I mean, at the crux of the matter is this settler-indigene issue, which, as I would always say, has been settled in our constitution, but unfortunately, the subnationals have not embraced it. I think the only state probably that has embraced it is Lagos. I know at the federal representative.
We saw it.
Elements of it.
Yeah, we saw it creep its ugly head during the elections.
Which was the reversal of progress that had been made previously. I have interacted with a particular member of House of Rep that is clearly not of a Yoruba extraction, and he was representing Lagos. I don't know if he's still there. But yeah, sadly, in 2023, we saw that.
I mean, it was something that we all used to love to see. I remember being in Kano and seeing a commissioner who was not from Kano State.
Exactly.
He was from Kogi State. It was really nice when you'd see Yorubas, and it used to make us feel like, okay, yes, integration is happening. But from time to time,
I think we need to make
comes back.
A more conscious effort, and I honestly blame our political parties. They need to take ownership of the
political
process.
Parties?
Yes, political parties.
I thought you'd say the political class.
No, political parties. They need to take ownership of the process and ensure that they bring in, if they have manifestos and they're able to influence the activities of their members through several checks that used to be in place that are not in existence anymore, then they would be able to determine some of these issues. If a party embraces equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just verbally, but in its processes, and it not just says it, but actually acts it, and ensures that its members act it, then of course we're going to see that. And I think we need to be truthful to ourselves. We are 36 sub-federations, as it were, and we interact to an extent where we cannot isolate ourselves. And so this desire for equity, diversity, and inclusion, we need to make it a national issue of national discourse, so that every Nigerian, irrespective of where you come from, as long as you have a legal basis to claim that you are a Nigerian, those provisions in the Constitution, you can live by them.
I mean, I want us to be able to talk a bit about the work that you do. It's very dangerous work, Kabiru.
Do I look dangerous to you?
Well, your taste for danger is a little higher than most.
My appetite is my risk appetite is
your risk
high.
appetite is a little. Am I wrong? Am I wrong in saying this?
No, you're
because
not.
I think I know a little about your risk appetite. But part of the work that I know that you do is negotiation, and that's a part of the conversation that we haven't really explored much as a people. Maybe government and security agencies are exploring all of this. But, ultimately, as a Nigerian, I don't want negotiation to be on the table, because what you're basically doing is opening a business. You have opened up a franchise. If you say we can negotiate, everybody will go into this crime knowing that they'll be negotiated with. And the more dangerous you are, the higher your negotiation. That makes me pray as a person. When I mean P-R-E-Y, that makes me someone that people can, make a franchise on top of. And I don't want to feel that way as a person, but it's something that you do. Talk to us a bit about this bit in the war against insecurity, the negotiation conversation. So
negotiation is a professional field that has emerged as a result of certain realizations. Almost every conflict at the end of the day would be negotiated. The resolution of that conflict would require some element of negotiation, either directly or indirectly. So as a result of that... Even
with terrorists, bandits, kidnappers?
At the end of the day, there would be some elements of negotiation. You can't shy away from that. But then how do you do it in a professional manner that you do not arm the terrorist or the criminal, or the kidnapper, as the case may be, and that is where professionals come in. The element or what the professionals do is to make sure the process is conducted in the manner that the outcome does not add to more risk. The risk is lowered to the point that it's acceptable to both sides. Now, only a professional can do that. So I can give you an example. Insurance companies engage professional negotiators. Governments engage professional negotiators. Intelligence arms of government there is no intelligence that does not have backdoor channels, irrespective of the nature, the issue that is at discuss. I hope we'll come back to this issue in Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso at some point, but even that requires some element of negotiation. It is when the negotiators have prepared the ground that then now the public face of the discussions would be seen. So what we do is a professional activity, and we do it because we realize there is a need to have an outcome that is positive. If you don't do it in that manner, then the outcome will not be positive. You would empower kidnappers, you will empower terrorists, but if you do it professionally, you would have succeeded in saving lives and not empowering, the bad guys among us.
Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty complicated, isn't it? It's not, I don't think it will be, what can we do for you to stop? I don't think I don't think that's how that negotiation works. It can be, what can we know? It will be a little more complicated than that. We may have to take something from you.
Usually starts with a demand. The moment you state your demand, then in my view, I've got you.
Because you're ready to play.
Exactly. The moment, that demand may be ridiculous, but it tells me that you have a reason. That reason may be illogical, but at least you've put a reason on the table, and then we start from there. One thing that is missing within the Nigerian context, and because it's the public here, I will be careful what I say, every negotiation relies on trigger points. There will be trigger points that when you as a negotiator you're using would allow you to influence in a very subtle manner the outcome of that negotiation. So in my opinion, I think our intelligence, the community, would need to emphasize that area, trigger points.
When it comes to Boko Haram, which has been with us for a very long time, a lot is not being done, I'm guessing, to ensure that this scourge is brought to an end. So, well, because whenever I'm very careful when I listen to the military speak. They always keep stressing kinetic and non-kinetic. When they stress the non-kinetic, you can literally see the anger in the eyes of the military personnel that is speaking to you. Non-kinetic, reduce poverty. And as he's saying it, I'm saying, okay, this man is trying to say something more than, what they told us in this press briefing. Are we failing in the non-kinetic measures? I will get to the kinetic ones. But when it comes to the non-kinetic, which many people believe is the root cause behind the insecurity, are we failing in doing that as a government?
So unfortunately, we haven't had an evaluation of the measures that we're implementing in that non-kinetic space. And that in itself is a red flag. We need to be able to evaluate in a very professional manner what we've done over the years. In 2013 or 2014, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, if I remember well, who is now the WTO DG, went to the UN General Assembly with a document and told the world that this is our CT, counter-terrorism measures. And of course, under it, you have the soft approach. And the world bought into it. A lot of development partners, a lot of countries, funded that activity. We should be able to review and tell ourselves, we did well here, we didn't do well here. This is a public forum, so I'm careful what I say, but there are several components. I'll use generic terms to talk about them. The de-radicalization component, the counter-radicalization component, the strategic communication component, and then, of course, engagement with our neighboring partners. Now, for each of these four components, if you pick them, certain projects have been implemented from that period, 2013 or 2014, up until today. The most popular one has been this Operation Safe Haven. That's what everybody kind of knows, and of course there is a lot of opposition to that project, but it was part of a process. And like I said, it was presented to the UN, UNGA, which is the probably biggest body of the United Nations body. It was presented there and the world accepted it and funded it actually. Now, where are we in it? What did we do well? What kind of mistakes we did? Point I'm trying to make is that the military, in the first place, should not be driving this soft component of counterterrorism.
Listening to the military actually drive this soft component, at least because the small criminology I have in my head, it makes me worry because it's not supposed to be coming from them. But where we're hearing it from the most is military spokespersons, military heads of military organizations, and development partners.
And more recently, our politicians.
I'm hearing development partners more now saying it.
And I think if I'm going to suggest or recommend going forward, we need to find a balance. Nobody is saying kinetic components are not important. They are important, especially given the current circumstances in the country. We need to be able to contain the situation and then to allow the non-kinetic. But I would like a situation where, and this is what experts have recommended, there should be 80% non-kinetic and 20% kinetic. So in our budget, as an example, we should be able to isolate at least 80% the number of non-kinetic operations that are ongoing, and then just 20%. 12% of our budget, 2024 budget, was to security.
I want to get, that's actually where my next question is going. So if the suggestion is that 80% of our efforts in the war against insecurity is non-kinetic, and then 20% is kinetic, but the second largest expenditure in our budget went to kinetic measures, and then other non-kinetic measures, like which will be incorporated in places like education, healthcare, poverty alleviation. Those places are largely being ignored.
I wouldn't say they're being ignored.
Well, not ignored, but not given the sort of that
so
is necessary.
Not incorporated into a strategic, quote unquote, non-kinetic national plan.
Some national plan that is about the non-kinetic measures. I want to be able to talk about our budget for the military. I had a guest here not too long ago who said it's not enough.
And it would never be enough if we continue along the line that we're going. I would describe the situation we have as a basket. It's a basket case. It's a bucket that has holes under it.
Holes?
Yeah, holes under it. So unless we block those holes, there is no amount of money.
What are these holes?
I like myself. I want to be able to go home and sleep. But on a serious note, we need to introduce stronger M&E, monitoring and evaluation capacities and capability within the security sector, including the military. When you say this, the rejection of military confidentiality, let them have their in-house M&E capabilities. It mustn't be an external
national
capability.
Security.
Number two, the standards department within the military. I'm not sure how effective that standards unit is within the military. It needs to be more effective in terms of ensuring that the procedures, the processes, the operations meet both national and international standards. As an example, I would love the next parliamentarian you invite to this program, have him answer to you on the several operations. Just yesterday, I was looking at my database, and I counted about 12 operations that are ongoing in the country. I would love you to ask that parliamentarian, what is the mandate of those operations? What is the period, the timelines that have been provided for those operations?
The military operations?
Yes.
Whirlpool,
What timelines? Every year we provide for them. But then what are they meant to achieve? As an example, I can tell you Hadarin Daji is meant to achieve the anti-banditry campaign to stop banditry. But if we allow it to go the way it's going, I'm sorry to say, Kiala, if we're still alive in the next 4 or 5 years, we're still going to be discussing Hadarin Daji because we're not measuring its performance.
Well, they do. The DDMO gives us a briefing every 2 weeks.
And I fault that briefing. And I would love you to ask him next
Mr.
time.
Buba does this every 2 weeks. We go to DDMO.
He's a handsome fellow. He wears his glasses. And he's cool.
And he tells us he goes. It's not just Hadarin Daji he talks about.
All the operations
across the country. Every 2 weeks he update. You're saying.
Now the reason why I said you should invite a parliamentarian and ask him those questions, I would be interested in knowing what is the timeline that has been given to Hadarin Daji. What is the timeline or are we just sinking money into something that has no end? Because let's wake up from this slumber. It's meant to be a stopgap operation. There are traditional security organizations in those locations. It was because those traditional security organizations
Failed.
could not manage the situation. Then we came up with these stopgap operations. And we've now institutionalized them as part of the national security architecture. Operation Safe Haven in Plateau State. Earlier when I spoke about Safe Haven, it wasn't Safe Haven I wanted to mention. It's Safe Corridor that I wanted to mention. But for Safe Haven, it's been there since 2010, 14 years. And nobody's even talking about the end of that operation. We shouldn't be operating like that. There should be measurable standards and metrics, as an example, to measure the performances of those. And the best suited institution of government to do that is the National Assembly. I mentioned the standards unit within the military, and then the M&E components. They should be able to have key performance indicators. And I'm delighted that the president has institutionalized Executive Order 13, which would allow us to measure the performances of all the security organizations. And those are the kind of questions and metrics that we would expect to see. What the performance is. If you say you kill terrorists, I'm going to go back and look at the sanctions list. All the names you give me when you are doing those press briefings, I'm going to compare it with the sanctions list. Are those names there, or are you just the one calling them terrorists? That's the way to go, because you can't. The Constitution does not give you the authority to declare anyone a terrorist. The Constitution gives only the Attorney General of the Federation, using our courts to declare someone a terrorist. So as a military personnel, if you suspect someone is a terrorist, the best you can do is to submit that name to the Attorney General, who uses the judicial process based on Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act to say, okay, this person is a terrorist.
Let's talk a bit about, let's talk about kidnapping, because that's the one that is affecting us here in the FCT. There's quite a lot that Nigerians who reside here are befuddled about. It doesn't make any, you can't go anywhere, you can't take a taxi. I understand we're supposed to go to parks, but we have a transportation problem to moving someone. If I was going to go to Area 1 from Guzape, at what park am I going? What park am I going to walk to?
For you to board.
For me to board. And even if I wanted to take a walk, how do I know I'm not going to be jacked? Someone comes, stabs me, takes my bag on the road.
Person who works in NTA, for those who don't know Abuja, I'll just describe it. So NTA is close to the Central Bank of Nigeria, and there are several government buildings there. So it's more or less a security zone. She closed from work, was walking towards the Central Bank, and hoodlums or miscreants, criminals, actually mocked her and used a knife. It was her bag they wanted to collect. And when she resisted, they actually stabbed her on her shoulder to collect the bag. And this happened around 9 p.m. So what you are saying is real.
I'm seeing that place in my head, because that part of, if she's coming from NTA, then that means that this part of Central Bank she's passing is Central Bank and Ecumenical Center. It means the Christian Ecumenical Center is directly
there. She could
opposite
actually
her.
see the security personnel deployed in the Central Bank when the incident happened.
Yeah. So we have a very insecure city.
I think we should measure that, qualify it.
Why? You don't think we're in an insecure city? You can't walk the streets?
The fact that I could drive from my office here without any security escort.
Really? So it's until our cars start getting attacked.
That's why I say we should qualify it. There are risks, there are vulnerabilities, but I wouldn't go to the extent of using the word insecure. In the UK, a friend who visited was about to check into his hotel, and someone came from outside and just grabbed his bag. In Germany, in a part of Frankfurt, the same thing happened to a VIP who visited. So the point I'm making, there would be risk, but it's probably not fair to say insecure cities.
I mean, people were asking the first PRO on one of our programs here, should there be a declaration of a state of insecurity in the FCT? And he said no. You agree with him?
Yes, I think they need to take the issue more seriously. Their responses so far have been knee-jerk. I think the response should be systematic. In security, when you have a challenge, one of the easiest things to do is to do a survey, or you can do an audit. That would now allow you to know, what do you have that is right? What do you have that is wrong? What do you need to improve upon? And in doing that, you bring three things together: the people, the technology, and the systems. When you marry these three things, you now identify the vulnerabilities along the line of 6 things I'll quickly mention them. We call them the 3Ds and the 3Rs of security. So number one, your ability to deter the threat element. When you give the examples of one chance, muggings and all of that, you identify it on the basis of these three things that I've mentioned. If the issue is one of inavailability of parks, you are in Guzape, you need a park to go to Area 1. If I'm in FCTA, okay, how do I make a park available? In this instance, okay, no, we can't make a park, but we can come up with an app that would allow someone who cannot, use a Bolt or any of the other riders to now, even if it's to share and get him or her to his destination. So point is, you do that assessment and then you base it on those three things: deter, deny, delay, and then the 3 R's response. Go to Kwali and place a call. Call 122 or 112. And then feed it the time it would take before any of the security agencies respond. That's what I expect. And then go to maybe Yanya or another part of along the Nasarawa route, still in FBT, and then do the same thing along the other axis of
and like places like Buhari.
Exactly, and place a call.
We have been told categorically that there is no actual, because I think it was 7 minutes. It's not.
No.
It's not. They told us on Channels TV here that there is no actual response time. No, that's not true. Depending on the security issue, the global standard is 2 to 15 minutes. And I'll give you an example. That's international standard. Well, I don't... because he explained to us, this was a very serious conversation I had with the force PR. He said, the response, I can't tell you that because we have issues of terrain. No, but I'm not... where are you calling me from? Kela, the truth of this is we need to integrate our security processes. When I speak here with all sense of responsibility, I'm not criticizing anyone. I want this to be clear. The intention is not to criticize or bring down anyone. We have at least 19 law enforcement agencies that have the capability for bearing arms within our national security architecture at the federal level. So when the first PRO says that, he's speaking for himself. And I don't think that's the kind of approach we want. The president has directed collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. In Buhari, I can bet you all those 19 are present there. They should come together. That 112 is being, I think, monitored by the Office of the National Security Advisor. But they told us that 112, it's not working. They gave us long numbers for the FCT. It was clear to us, Kabiru. They were very clear. They didn't lie to us. There is no three-digit number for the FCT. That is not acceptable. There should be. Because I know the NCC has launched a communication center and these are the things you asked me earlier on that I didn't want to speak about. Corruption. There is no reason why those long numbers should not be integrated with the three-digit number. The same thing with the SVTA command center that have long numbers. There is no reason why. Look, they're all the same government. They should shake the hands of the coordinators of that 112. But the reason why that is not happening is because of corruption. And I expect that there should be a presidential directive for that type of coordination. There is no reason why they should have separate platforms. When it comes to the border states and manning Abuja's borders, what are we getting wrong? I asked one time, the security agents, we see them on the highway. If I was a bandit or a kidnapper, I would not use the highway. I will use bushes and mountains. How are those places being manned? Do you have any idea? As far as I know, the strategy has been, the G7 collaborative effort, and then a task force was raised, and that task force attempted to create, what do they call them, green zone, buffer zones. What they did is they reduced the foliage, the trees, and then also attempted to scatter the slums. Because you also have Fulani settlements inside those forests, so they scattered them. But in terms of surveillance capabilities that will allow us to monitor, even if it's ants, thousands of them that are moving, or a big animal, because that's what we need. We need eyes in those locations. The surveillance that would allow us to take note of movement. And Kela, the annoying thing is that we don't learn in this country. In 2012, if I remember well, a certain holding center here in Guzape that was holding a suspect terrorist was attacked. Mm-hmm. And the attack was successful. They freed their members and they escaped through the same hills. Now, what did we do after that?
Nothing. Now, this has happened recently, and we've created platforms, as it were, that would work for a few weeks, months, and then it stops. But what long-term strategies have we developed to have eyes, surveillance capabilities in those forest and mountainous areas? None. The options are there. Earlier on, I spoke about people, technology, and systems. There are hunters. I hike a lot, so I can tell you that there are hunters, there are farmers in those locations. How have we tried to incorporate them into our security system? Number two, technology. Either satellites or...
Do we have forest rangers?
We do.
But in Abuja?
I'm not sure in Abuja.
I've only seen forest rangers in
other locations. Now, because those mountainous areas and forested parts are not designated forests or reserves, I don't think they will be deployed there.
Yes, because it's usually around reserves.
The designated forests and reserves. But what I mean is incorporating locals. I would, with all sense of responsibility for the benefit of the general good, I will mention this. As you know, I have a database, and when we released our report for December, it was very obvious to us that something was wrong in Abuja. We saw a 168% increase in abduction in the FCT Abuja. And I mean, even a kid that you mentioned 168%, he would tell you, oh, this is high, this is a lot, 168 month to month. And so we knew something was wrong.
From the beginning of 2023?
No, just for November to December.
Between November and December?
Yes. My point is, if our security agencies had that type of security management tool, it would have told them that, look, wake up, guys. Something is happening or something is about to happen. So my point...
You say they don't. I don't think they don't.
They don't. I'm sorry to say they don't. From when NSAS happened till date, a lot of the security organizations have received budgetary provisions to develop that capability, but sadly they've not. Because if they did, this is obvious. It's very obvious. All you needed to do is to compare what happened in November with what happened in December, and you will see something is wrong. So you will not wait until a family of 7 is abducted. That's the point I'm trying to get. It would have told you, because that's intelligence. It would have told you that this is about to happen. It would have told you, okay, deploy more personnel, deploy more technology, deploy a system there to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, it didn't. And the saddest part, Kela, accountability. Nobody has been held responsible. I run a company. If I employ you and I give you a responsibility and you're failing, I would either seek to improve your capacity by training you, or I would fire you. Now, if you appoint someone to head a particular department in government, policing as an example, and you give him a responsibility, lower the kidnap level, and the person doesn't lower it, you either improve his capacity or you fire him. It's as simple as that. Again, remember, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying that I need to see these organizations working together. When you said the first PRO said that those 3 numbers, I mean, he's not exactly correct. The government, as far as we recognize the office of the NSA as a government department, as far as we recognize the fire service as a government department, they have those 3-digit numbers.
Yes, because that's what he explained to us.
And they are functional.
He said it's for the fire service. He said,
they need to extend a handshake to those bodies. They don't need to create a new platform. If today you have a distress situation that requires policing intervention and you call the fire service, they will transfer that call to the police. So why is he saying that? That's my point. The president issued a directive. I want a situation where the presidency would be able to follow up on those directives and look at the granular nature of these things, because it's easy to speak about them, but the implementation is the difficulty. We cannot have a situation where each government department wants to have a platform for calling in. It's ridiculous. One platform that can reach all the agencies. It's as easy as that.
Let's talk a bit about some of the progress that security agencies have made, at least since the attack in Plateau and with the Abuja kidnappings, particularly the ones in Buhari and in Kuchiko as well. We saw a parade of... the first thing we noticed was that there was a special deployment. So we found out that a special intervention squad had been deployed by the Inspector General of Police, and then we now stay seeing parade of suspects. So these one, and then you're watching them, and you see this person say, "I kidnapped 3. We collected 500,000 from the first one, collected 400,000. Third one, we were not able to collect the money before they cut us. Does someone like that in trial? Does he still need to go to court?
Of course.
He still does?
Of course.
He just confessed.
He did, but again, our law.
Can we keep it moving?
Our law provides for trial, even if he confessed. I mean, Evans confessed. How long did it take them before they eventually convicted him? And I'm even hearing that there are issues regarding that.
Okay, so these people, these suspects, because I know you've been very opposed really to parade of suspects why? I understand the fact that they need to go through a trial process, but Nigerians in many ways need to see how they have caught people. Thank God. They'll feel a little better. These are people that kidnapped that girl in Buhari. Hey, we thank God though, Nigerians want to feel that way. If laws are made for men, true. Not the other way around. So if Nigerians like to feel, they are working, I feel safer, isn't that a good thing?
It's a good thing, but
must we impose international laws?
Let me play the devil's advocate. What if the security agencies recognize and are aware that Nigerians want to feel, and then they are now playing along just to make Nigerians feel good?
As long as they are catching the people now and they are confessing.
Again, the devil's advocate. You probably have heard this theory that every time they appoint a new DPO, he does the parade thing.
They do a parade every month.
So we need to have controls in place.
So you say no. Let's not parade suspects.
No, let's try suspects.
They try them afterwards, Kabiru.
I'm sorry to say the evidences don't show that. How long did it take to try Evans? Everybody was convinced that Evans was who he said he was. Everybody was convinced. He himself confessed. But how long did it take them to try him? And one of the things I'm hoping to see going forward is that let's enhance the criminal justice system. Let's enhance trial and let's publicize those trials. That in itself will be a deterrence. No matter how much you like someone, if you see the person being displayed and he has been convicted for a crime and the processes were transparent, come on, we're not that bad.
I kept a particular story for you. This is a story that I heard a few days ago, and it was during the parade of suspects.
Okay.
One particular kidnapper, they had kidnapped a man in Abuja, I won't say his name. They had kidnapped him from his house in Abuja. They were driving him to Kano. And the police apprehended them. You know the story. I know
the story.
So then the police apprehended them in Kaduna. They had taken money from his account and everything. And during the parade of suspects, they said he was in a stretcher. And then the force PRO told us, he said that he was actually on bail. So he was being tried for another kidnapping case.
When he now did.
And he was on bail. And then he did this next kidnapping.
Isn't that the person that his sister went on social media to say
I don't know.
He's wrongly accused?
I don't know all of that part. but my point is, you see, with the law process, is it, because we started screaming in the newsroom when we heard this, is it possible someone that is being tried for kidnapping is on bail?
It depends.
You see the problem with these, your laws, Kabiru?
Yeah, but we have to protect the innocent. I would rather have, what is it, 199 suspects, quote and unquote, not molested in the manner that I'm seeing that, and then one true criminal prosecuted. Because in that midst, you probably covered the story of a lady that was mobbed in Lagos. The allegation was that it was a blasphemy case. And when we got to find out, it was just a case of envy. Her wares were more attractive. People were coming to buy her things, and her neighbor got envious, and then he, just leveled something on her, and before you know it, people mobbed her and killed her. So my point is we should protect everyone until a competent court of jurisdiction declares that person, because otherwise we run the risk of, when I referred to our Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act, there is a reason why that act says that only the Attorney General of Federation, through the judicial process, can declare any group or individual terrorist. Two guys in the security force wearing his uniform, and a civilian they were all cutting a lady. And the lady's attention was going through the civilian. The next thing, the security force personnel alleged that that guy is a terrorist. And he was arrested and kept in detention for more than 6 years until the family came to us and we started looking into that case. So imagine if the circumstance is that any terrorist is killed, you know, upon
these
arrest.
are very unfortunate situations, Kabiru.
And they are bound. In my office alone, we have about 500 cases of persons that are either missing, that have been alleged or accused of certain offenses.
That's terrible. But this man that was on, if he was locked up,
I don't know what the provisions.
he wouldn't have been able to go and kidnap another person.
I don't point earlier on. I referred to our criminal justice system. The entire processes within the criminal justice system need to be corrected, from the point of law enforcement to the custodial center to the court, to the legal system, the court itself that prosecutes them. Kela, go to our law enforcement agencies and ask them to show you their evidence rooms. How do you hope to prosecute someone when you don't have an evidence room? Every time they make an arrest, you see them touching the evidences. And those are the things that the courts would use to prosecute. So first off, our standard operating procedures for arrest doesn't even seem to exist.
Let's talk a bit about some of the elements when it comes to the kidnapping situations and the insecurity. There's some elements that Nigerians have noticed, one of them being the fact that people are able to call for ransom, you know. So that has called to question what our communications agencies are doing, you know, to ensure that this is not possible. Ransom is paid through some payment platforms.
No, the processes for opening the accounts, either we are not complied with, and that's where the regulatory issue comes in, or perhaps even if they are complied with, there may be complicity within the system that gives them that temerity. Recently, I had a particular case. You already mentioned that I do negotiation. It was one of our traditional banks that was used. And then, luckily, I know the chief security officer of that bank, the overall chief security officer. I placed a call to him to say, hey, your account is being used to collect illicit funds.
Ransom payments.
You said it, I didn't say it. And what he told me, it made sense. But it gave me an indication of why those guys are bold enough to do what they did. So first off, he does not have the power to flag that account. I have to go to the law enforcement agencies who would, through a lawyer, and then there will be a legal process before that account is either flagged.
It takes less than 24 hours for this to happen.
So point is, it's the difficulty. And then the fact that I'm not even sure that I will be protected if I volunteer that information. That has happened. So those are the things that we need to address. We need to make sure the confidentiality element, when you volunteer security information, first off, your identity is protected, and then the certainty that that information will be acted upon.
Does this apply to ransom calls as well?
No, in the case of ransom calls, it's about tracking. And then so I am aware that the capability for tracking is there. Maybe there is a need to, improve upon it, but it's there. In most of the instances where I've interacted with our security agencies, they're able to track.
Yes, I know.
But this is the difficulty. Kidnap is in most instances an organized crime. And to the average listener, when I say organized crime, he or she may not understand. But I'll try to break it down within what I can do in public. So it means, for instance, it's not just one person doing it. It means, for instance, that the person planning the activity is not likely to be the person that will carry it out. It means, for instance, that the person that is going to hold the victim is not likely the person
It's
who
a business. Everyone has roles.
with different. Yeah. So let's assume we're able to track the caller. I'll give a case that I handled. The abduction happened in Gombe. The negotiation was taking place in Kano. The victim was being held in Sokoto. And then the people who wanted to collect the money were in Rivers State. 4 states involved with different criminals. So let's assume you want to descend on the negotiators in Kano. What it means is that you are endangering the life of the victim who is in Sokoto. So what is required is intelligence. The reason why we got to know this information, I guess, because I was involved. I was able to help and direct and all of that. And then we were able to put on a map to say, okay, this is coming from here, this is coming. And then we kind of knew where they were. Now, if we're going to launch an operation to rescue that person, there has to be a simultaneous operation. Simultaneous, underline that word, in 4 locations. Now, you help me answer. Do we have that capability? That's one consideration. Now, that operation would be a high-risk operation. It requires a tactical force that can conduct precision-style operations, the type that the US did when they came to rescue their citizen. They will enter and rescue that person without the people holding her even aware. And if they need to take them out, take them out. Kela, do we have that capability?
We should.
We should. Every year there is a budgetary provision. So let's go back to our National Assembly. These are the questions, instead of what we see in oversight functions, these are the kind of oversight functions that we expect them to do. We need to have tactical units with capabilities and then intelligence collection that allows this type of precision-style operations.
Before we let you go, we do have a little bit more just a little bit of time before we wrap up today.
I want us to talk about Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Apart from what you...
That in itself... That in itself is a whole... Well, you painted the picture for us, and how it's if you go around West Africa, you wouldn't need to watch the television. You would know that
the angle that I didn't touch was the North African angle that is keeping me awake at night, and Central Africa, and that our those in charge of our both foreign policy and then the foreign service need to be more conscious and focused on. Algeria and Morocco. A lot of what is happening is driven by those 2 countries. A lot of what's happening here? No, in Niger, Chad,
okay,
Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. There appear to be, what do they call this type of war? Where 2 countries are fighting, but they're using a third country to fight. Anyway, the 2 countries, Algeria and Morocco, as you know, they've had this very long, frosty relationship over Western Sahara. And now they're using these 3 countries to exercise their influence. And these 3 countries are falling prey to it. Now, what would likely happen is one or the other would release. Algeria is infamous for that. It could release non-state armed groups to cause some kind of mayhem in those 3 countries, and it will end up in Nigeria. Now that's that. The second one is Sudan. Because of the conflict going on in Sudan, arms are being purchased at a price that is scary. And just like it happened in Libya, we're worried that it would come to Nigeria. The same way arms trickled down from Libya down into West Africa, the crisis in Sudan, we could also experience that again here. So very concerning. These are all geopolitical issues that we need to plan ahead. And how do we tackle this? We need to strengthen our diplomatic capabilities. We need to bring those 2 countries together. We need to make sure that this is brought to an end. We can't afford that this Sahelian alliance that we're seeing emerging grows to what it is. Otherwise, we're going to allow Algeria and Morocco turn our neighbors into a playground of battle. And we will be the grass. Exactly. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Kabiru Adamu, for being with us on Political Paradigm, and good luck with all the work I know you have ahead of you. Thank you very much, and you too. We have been speaking with Mr. Kabiru Adamu, security analyst, expert on intelligence, negotiations, and national security policy in Nigeria and the Sahel region. And that's all on Political Paradigm today. Please let us know your thoughts on today's topic. Join us on channelstv.com. Leave your comments, respectfully, of course. We love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I am Kayla Magwa. See you next time.